The ink on the divorce papers was barely dry when he popped the champagne. Alexander Sterling, the tech mogul who graced the cover of Forbes 3 times, didn't just divorce his wife of 5 years, he erased her. He handed the pen to Eleanor, a woman the tabloids called plain and boring, while his mistress, the Oscar-nominated actress Isabella Montrose, watched from the doorway wearing Eleanor's favorite silk robe. Alexander thought he was cutting off dead weight to ascend to Hollywood royalty. He didn't know that the plain woman signing her name wasn't just a housewife. She was the hidden matriarch of the Vance Steel Dynasty, the very company that supplied the steel for Alexander's skyscrapers. He wasn't signing a divorce decree. He was signing his own bankruptcy. Location: the Sterling Penthouse, 432 Park Avenue, New York City. Date: November 14th. The silence in the penthouse was usually comforting, a testament to the soundproofing that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Tonight, however, the silence felt predatory. Eleanor Sterling sat at the edge of the sprawling mahogany dining table. It was an antique, imported from a French chateau, one of the many things Alexander had bought to prove he had taste to match his billions. Her hands were folded in her lap, her knuckles white. Across from her stood Alexander. He was pacing, his Italian loafers clicking against the marble floor. He looked impeccable as always, charcoal suit, tie loosened just enough to suggest a hard day's work, though Eleanor knew he had spent the afternoon at the Tiffany & Co.'s flagship store. "It's not about cruelty, Ellie," Alexander said, finally stopping to pour himself a drink. He didn't offer her one. "It's about evolution. Brands evolve, companies evolve, people evolve, and frankly, we've evolved in different directions." Eleanor looked up. Her face was devoid of makeup, her brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. To the outside world, she was the mousy librarian who had somehow snagged New York's most eligible bachelor 5 years ago. "Evolution," Eleanor repeated, her voice steady. "Is that what you call sleeping with Isabella Montrose for 6 months?" Alexander sighed, the sound of a man inconvenienced by a triviality. "Don't make this sordid. Isabella understands me. She understands the spotlight. She understands the pressure of my life. You're content with charity galas and reading books in the garden. You're a shadow, Ellie, and I need a star." The elevator doors at the far end of the penthouse chimed softly. They slid open, and Isabella Montrose stepped out. She was breathtaking, even casually dressed. She wore a cashmere sweater that Eleanor recognized. It was hers, missing from her closet for 2 weeks, and tight designer jeans. "Is it done, Alex?" Isabella asked, ignoring Eleanor entirely. Her voice was that famous husky purr that had won her a Golden Globe. "Almost," Alexander said, sliding a thick stack of documents across the mahogany table toward Eleanor. "The settlement is generous, Ellie. $2 million, the apartment in Jersey. You keep your car. It's more than fair considering you signed a prenup." Eleanor looked at the papers. "Decree of dissolution of marriage." "I don't want the money, Alex," Eleanor said quietly. Isabella laughed, a sharp, tinkling sound, as she poured herself a glass of Alexander's scotch. "Oh, honey, don't try to play the martyr. Take the cash. It's not like you have any career prospects. What was it you did before Alex saved you? Assistant librarian?" Eleanor stood up. She wasn't tall, but something in her posture shifted. The slump vanished. Her spine straightened with a rigidity that would have reminded a historian of a soldier bracing for cannon fire. "I was an archivist," Eleanor corrected softly. "I managed history." "Semantics," Alexander waved a hand dismissively. "Just sign the papers, Ellie. I have a PR team coming in at 8 a.m. to handle the announcement. We want to control the narrative. Amicable separation due to growing apart." Standard boilerplate. Eleanor reached into her purse, a worn leather tote that Alexander hated, and pulled out her own pen. It wasn't a cheap plastic stick. It was a heavy fountain pen with a nib of solid iridium, engraved with a crest too small for Alexander to notice from where he stood. She looked at her husband, the man she had loved, the man she had supported when his first startup, Nebula Tech, nearly collapsed because he couldn't secure raw materials. She had made a phone call then, a call he never knew about, that lowered the price of structural steel for his servers by 40%. That call had saved his career. "You are sure about this, Alexander?" she asked. "Once I signed this, there is no going back. Our assets, our lives, and our business connections are severed." "Business connections?" Alexander scoffed. "Ellie, the only connection you have is to the housekeeper." "Yes, I'm sure. Sign it." Eleanor uncapped the pen. The scratching sound of the nib on the paper was the loudest thing in the room. Eleanor V. She didn't write Sterling. She simply signed her initial. "Done," she said. She didn't ask for the check. She didn't ask for the keys to the Jersey apartment. She simply placed the pen back in her bag. "You can keep the apartment," she said, turning to the elevator. "And the money. I won't be needing your charity." "Suit yourself," Isabella sneered, draping her arms around Alexander's neck. "More for us. Bye, Plain Jane." As the elevator doors closed, hiding the sight of her husband kissing another woman, Eleanor didn't cry. She pulled out her phone. It was an encrypted device, not the standard iPhone Alexander insisted she use. She dialed a number that hadn't been used in 5 years. "This is Vanguard 1, she said into the phone. Her voice was no longer soft. It was cold iron. "Initiate protocol homecoming. I'm leaving New York. Tell the board of directors I will be at the Pittsburgh headquarters by morning. The hiatus is over. Location: Teterboro Airport, private hangar. Date: November 15th. The media storm hit before Eleanor even landed in Pennsylvania. By the time Alexander's PR team released the statement at 8 a.m., TMZ and the Daily Mail had already run the story, leaked intentionally by Isabella's agent to maximize the drama. Billionaire Alex Sterling dumps frumpy wife for Hollywood bombshell. The photos were brutal. They used a picture of Eleanor from a rainy day where she looked washed out and tired, placed next to a red carpet photo of Isabella looking radiant in Dior. The narrative was set. Alexander had upgraded. Eleanor was the sad, discarded starter wife who couldn't keep up with the visionary genius of her husband. Social media was merciless. AidTechBro99 tweeted, "About time Alex dropped the deadweight. You can't run a Fortune 500 company with a librarian on your arm." Bella Fanfrever posted, "Finally a couple that looks the part." Lex Bella. Alexander read the tweets in the back of his Maybach, a satisfied smirk on his face. "Trending #1 worldwide," he told Isabella, who was scrolling through Instagram comments. "The stock price for Sterling Dynamics is actually up 2%. The market loves a power couple." "They love me," Isabella corrected, checking her makeup in the compact mirror. "And they love that you're finally with someone who has flavor." Meanwhile, in a private hangar at Teterboro Airport, a very different scene was unfolding. Eleanor stepped out of the taxi. She carried only 2 suitcases. Waiting for her on the tarmac wasn't a commercial jet, or even a chartered Cessna. It was a Gulfstream G700, painted in a matte midnight blue. The tail number didn't end in a standard registration. It bore the insignia of a silver anvil. A man in a dark suit stood by the stairs. He was older, with white hair and a scar running down his cheek. This was Marcus Thorne, the head of security for the Vance family for 30 years. "Miss Eleanor," Marcus said, bowing his head deeply. It wasn't a bow of servitude, but of immense respect. "Welcome back." "Hello, Marcus," Eleanor said, the wind whipping her hair. "Is the family aware?" "The board has been convened. Your grandmother, she is relieved. She said she knew the Sterling experiment would fail eventually." Eleanor winced slightly. Grandmother always did have a way with, "I told you so." "And the press?" "Blocked," Marcus said as he took her bags. "We've scrubbed your real maiden name from the public digital archives, as usual. The tabloids think you are Eleanor Vance, daughter of a high school teacher from Ohio. They have no idea they are dealing with the Eleanor Vance, sole heiress to Vanguard Steel and Heavy Industries." Vanguard Steel. It wasn't a flashy tech company. It didn't have an app. It was the backbone of the American industrial complex. They owned the mines, the refineries, the shipping lines, and the patents for the high-tensile alloys used in everything from SpaceX rockets to the structural beams of the very building Alexander Sterling lived in. They were a ghost dynasty, old money that preferred to remain invisible while controlling the world's infrastructure. Eleanor walked up the stairs of the jet. She paused at the top and looked back at the New York skyline. Somewhere in those shimmering lights, Alexander was probably toasting his new freedom. "He thinks I was dependent on him," Eleanor whispered. "He is about to learn," Marcus said from behind her, "that a skyscraper is nothing without its steel skeleton." The jet engines roared to life. Inside the cabin, the luxury was understated, but absolute. Eleanor sat in a leather armchair and opened a dossier waiting on the table. The cover read, "Sterling Dynamics, Supply Chain Vulnerabilities." She flipped to page 4. Alexander's company was currently building the Sterling Spire, a 120-story megastructure in Dubai intended to be the headquarters for his new AI division. It was 40% complete. "Marcus," Eleanor said, pressing the intercom button. "Yes, Mum?" "Get me the current contract status for the Sterling Spire project, specifically the supplier of the Grade 9 seismic steel beams." "That would be a subsidiary of ours, Ma'am." "North Atlantic Ore. We supply 90% of the project." "Not anymore," Eleanor said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Put a freeze on all shipments to Sterling Dynamics effective immediately. Cite supply chain irregularities and quality control audits. Indefinite delay." "That will cost him millions a day in penalties, Ma'am." "I know," Eleanor said, watching New York disappear beneath the clouds. He wanted a story full of drama for his new life. I'm just helping him write it. Location: Sterling Dynamics, HQ, Silicon Valley, Vanguard Estate, Pittsburgh. Date: 3 months later. The honeymoon phase, as it turned out, had a strict expiration date. For Alexander Sterling, it lasted exactly 90 days. Life with Isabella was a whirlwind of red carpets, paparazzi flashes, and exclusive parties. But the cracks were appearing. Isabella wasn't just high maintenance, she was a black hole of attention. She interrupted board meetings to ask Alexander's opinion on dress swatches. She threw tantrums when he had to work late. She treated his staff like indentured servants, causing his executive assistant of 10 years to quit. Alexander sat in his glass-walled office, rubbing his temples. The headache had been there for a week. "Alex, darling," Isabella burst in, followed by a camera crew. She was filming a reality show, The Real Life of Bella, a project she had badgered him into financing. "The lighting in here is terrible. Can we move your desk to the balcony?" "Isabella, I'm working," Alexander snapped, louder than he intended. The camera crew froze. "I have a crisis with the Dubai Tower. Construction has been halted for 2 weeks." "Boring." Isabella rolled her eyes. "Just buy more bricks or whatever. Look, the Met Gala is coming up, and I need you to look less stressed. You're giving me wrinkles just looking at you." She motioned for the cameras to cut. "Seriously, Alex, fix it. You're the genius billionaire. Why is the building stopped?" "Because," Alexander hissed, standing up, "the steel supplier ghosted us. They froze the shipments. We can't find another vendor who makes that specific alloy. It's proprietary. So sue them. We're trying, but the parent company is buried under shell corporations. We can't even find a name to serve the papers to." Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away, the atmosphere was very different. The boardroom of Vanguard Steel was a cavernous space of oak and brass, smelling of lemon oil and serious money. 12 men and women, the captains of industry, sat around the table. At the head sat Eleanor. Gone were the cardigans and the messy ponytail. She wore a tailored navy suit that cost more than Alexander's car, her hair cut into a sharp, commanding bob. She didn't look like the librarian anymore. She looked like a queen on a warpath. "The audit of the European division is complete," Eleanor said, her voice projecting clearly without a microphone. "We are up 14% in the Asian markets." "And the sterling situation?" asked Mr. Henderson, a board member who had known Eleanor since she was a child. "The freeze is holding," Eleanor said, calmly, reviewing a tablet screen. "Sterling Dynamics has missed 3 construction deadlines. The investors in Dubai are getting restless. Their stock has dropped 18% since the divorce." "Is the goal to bankrupt him, Ma'am?" Henderson asked. "Because if we squeeze too hard, the antitrust regulators might sniff around." "The goal," Eleanor said, looking up with eyes that glinted like polished chrome, "is to remind him of his place. He thinks he is a self-made god. I am simply removing the pedestal he stands on. However," she paused. She tapped the screen. "He has scheduled an emergency supplier summit in Chicago next week. He's invited every major industrial supplier in the Northern Hemisphere to try and bid for the contract. He's desperate." "Are we attending?" "Vanguard doesn't attend summits. We host them," Eleanor said. "But North Atlantic Ore will be there. And I think it's time the CEO of North Atlantic Ore made a personal appearance." A murmur went around the room. They knew what this meant. "You're going to reveal yourself?" Henderson asked, concerned. "The media will be there. He will be there. He invited the world to watch his life," Eleanor said, standing up to close the meeting. "I think it's time I made a cameo." Back in California, Alexander's phone rang. It was his chief operations officer. "Alex, good news. We got a seat at the Chicago Industrial Summit. The rumor is the CEO of the holding company that owns our steel supply will be there." Finally, Alex exhaled. "Who is it? Some old guy? I can charm him. I can buy him out." "We don't have a name, sir. Just a title. They call the CEO the Iron Lady." "Iron Lady?" Alex laughed, adjusting his tie. "Sounds like a challenge. Book the jet, and tell Isabella to stay home. I need to focus." "Sir, Isabella has already tweeted that she's coming with you to Chicago for a shopping spree." Alex slammed the phone down. He looked out the window at the smoggy sunset. He missed the quiet evenings with Ellie. He missed her listening ear. He missed the way she would massage his shoulders without him asking. "No," he thought, shaking his head. "She was weak. I am a lion, and lions don't look back." He didn't know that the lion was walking straight into a trap set by the tamer. Location: the Grand Ballroom, the Palmer House, Hilton, Chicago. Date: December 2nd. Chicago in December was a biting, frigid beast, a stark contrast to the climate-controlled artificiality of Alexander Sterling's life. The wind off Lake Michigan rattled the windows of the limousine, but inside The air was thick with the scent of Isabella's perfume, a cloying floral scent that Alex was beginning to associate with migraines. "I don't see why I had to come," Isabella complained, scrolling through her phone. The screen illuminated her face, which was currently contoured to perfection. "This is an industrial summit, Alex. It's going to be full of old men talking about rust." "It's not rust, it's infrastructure," Alexander snapped, checking his tie in the reflection of the window. He looked tired. The circles under his eyes were visible, even through the concealer his makeup artist had applied. "And you had to come because the investors are spooked. They need to see us as a united front. The power couple, remember?" "Well, the power couple needs a drink," Isabella muttered. "And remind me again why we're chasing this Iron Lady. Can't you just buy her company?" "I tried," Alex said, his voice tight. "They're private, hostile takeover proof. If I don't get her to sign off on the steel beam shipments by tonight, the Dubai Tower is officially dead. The penalties alone will wipe out our Q4 profits." The limo pulled up to the curb. A swarm of photographers, tipped off by Isabella, Alex suspected, began to flash their bulbs. Alexander put on his winning smile, the one that had charmed venture capitalists for a decade. He took Isabella's hand. "Smile," he whispered. "Look like you adore me." "I adore your credit card limit," she whispered back, flashing a dazzling smile for variety. Inside, the grand ballroom was a sea of dark suits and grey hair. This wasn't the tech world. There were no hoodies, no beanbag chairs, no disruption. This was old money. This was coal, oil, freight, and steel. The people in this room didn't care about Instagram followers. They cared about tonnage and tariffs. Alexander felt out of place. He was a disruptor, a tech visionary. These men looked at him like he was a parlor trick. "Sterling!" a voice boomed. Alex turned to see Victor Krum, a Russian shipping magnate he had met once at Davos. "Victor," Alex extended a hand. "Good to see you." Victor didn't take the hand. He looked Alex up and down, his eyes landing on Isabella's dress, a plunging red number that was entirely inappropriate for a conservative business summit. "I hear you are having trouble with your erection," Victor said loudly, causing a nearby group to chuckle. Alex stiffened. "Excuse me?" "Your building," Victor clarified, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "It cannot go up. No steel. Very embarrassing. In my country, when a man cannot finish what he starts, we do not call him a visionary. We call him a failure." "It's a supply chain hiccup," Alex said through gritted teeth. "I'm meeting with the CEO of North Atlantic Ore tonight to sort it out." Victor laughed, a deep, belly-shaking sound. "You are meeting the Iron Lady? Good luck, little boy. She eats men like you for breakfast. She does not like, how do you say, flash." He gestured vaguely at Isabella. Isabella bristled. "Excuse me, I am an Oscar nominee. And this is a room for people who build the world, not people who pretend," Victor said, turning his back on them. Alex steered Isabella away, his grip on her arm tight. "Keep your mouth shut," he hissed. "We are bleeding status here." They made their way to the VIP section, a roped-off area near the stage where the keynote speech was about to begin. The program listed the speaker simply as the chairwoman of the Vanguard Group. "Vanguard," Alex muttered. "They own North Atlantic Ore. They're the whale. If I can get 5 minutes with the chairwoman, I can bypass the subsidiary and get the steel." "God, this champagne is cheap," Isabella complained, sipping a flute from a passing tray. "Alex, look at that woman over there, the one in the white suit. Who wears white in winter?" Alex looked. Standing near the stage, surrounded by a phalanx of security and attentive executives, was a woman. Her back was to them. She wore a white power suit, impeccably tailored, stark against the sea of black tuxedos. Her posture was regal. "That must be her," Alex said, straightening his jacket. "Stay here, Bella. Do not move. Do not tweet." "Whatever," Isabella sighed, turning to flirt with a waiter. Alex approached the group. His heart was pounding. This was it, the charm offensive. "Excuse me," Alex said, projecting his voice to cut through the conversation. "I'm Alexander Sterling, CEO of Sterling Dynamics. I believe we have some business to discuss regarding the Dubai project." The security guard stepped forward to block him, but the woman in the white suit raised a hand. The guards parted. She turned around slowly. Alexander Sterling stopped her. His brain stuttered. He blinked, sure that the stress was causing hallucinations. The face was familiar, yet entirely alien. The features were Eleanor's, the high cheekbones, the soft curve of the jaw. But gone was the woman who wore oversized sweaters and apologized for taking up space. This woman wore diamonds that were heirlooms, not gifts. Her makeup was sharp, accentuating eyes that looked at him not with love or even hate, but with the crushing indifference of a glacier. "Hello, Alexander," Eleanor said. Her voice was smooth, low, and terrifyingly calm. "Ellie?" Alex whispered, his voice cracking. What are you doing here? How did you get past security?" The executives around her chuckled darkly. "Mr. Sterling," Eleanor said, "I am security. Location, the VIP Circle, Chicago Industrial Summit. Time, moments later." The silence that fell over the immediate vicinity was heavy. Alexander looked at his ex-wife, trying to reconcile the image of the woman who used to bake blueberry muffins on Sundays with this titan standing before him. "I don't understand," Alex stammered. He looked at the man standing next to her, Marcus Thorne, the security chief from the airfield. You're with Vanguard?" "Alexander," Eleanor said, stepping closer. She was wearing heels that made her nearly his height. "I am Vanguard." The words hit him like a physical blow. Vanguard, the shadowy conglomerate that controlled 30% of the global steel market, the company he had been trying to get a meeting with for 6 months. "That's impossible," Alex laughed nervously. "Your father was a history teacher in Ohio. You collect rare books." "My father was the youngest son of Archibald Vance, the founder of Vanguard Steel," Eleanor corrected. "He chose to leave the life and teach. But when my grandfather died 5 years ago, the trust passed to me. I have been the chairwoman of the board since the month before we got married." Alexander felt the blood drain from his face. He did the math. 5 years? But I was struggling then. Nebula Tech was almost bankrupt, and then suddenly the price of raw materials dropped, Eleanor finished for him. "You secured a contract with a supplier you had never heard of, at rates that were frankly charitable. You thought it was your brilliance, Alexander. It was my wedding gift." Alex staggered back slightly. You fixed the prices." "I subsidized your incompetence," Eleanor said, her voice hard. "I believed in you. I thought you were a genius who just needed a break. I kept my identity secret because I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for the Vance fortune. I wanted a partner, not a parasite." She took a step forward, invading his personal space. "And for 5 years, I played the role. I cooked your dinner while managing a multi-billion-dollar portfolio from my iPad while you slept. I listened to you brag about your self-made empire, knowing that I was the one holding up the foundation." "Ellie, wait!" Alex's mind was racing. This changed everything. She wasn't a discarded librarian. She was one of the richest women on the planet. If this is true, then we can fix this." The Dubai Tower, the steel. You can sign the release. He reached out to touch her arm. Marcus Thorne stepped forward, his hand hovering over his jacket, but Eleanor stopped him with a glance. You think this is a negotiation? Eleanor asked, tilting her head. We're family, Alex pleaded, dropping his voice to a seductive whisper. Technically. Look, the divorce isn't final yet. There's a cooling-off period. I made a mistake, Ellie. Isabella, she's a fling, a midlife crisis. But you and I, we're a team. We built Sterling Dynamics together. We didn't build it together, Eleanor said. I built it. You just put your name on the building. Suddenly, a shrill voice cut through the tension. Alex, why are you talking to the help? Isabella Montrose sashayed into the circle, a glass of champagne in hand. She looked Eleanor up and down with a sneer. Oh my God, is that Plain Jane? What are you doing here? Did you get a job catering the event? The circle of executives went dead silent. Victor Crumb, standing nearby, actually gasped. Eleanor shifted her gaze to Isabella. It was like a lioness looking at a yapping chihuahua. Isabella Montrose, Eleanor said. I enjoyed your performance in the Midnight Garden, although I found your character's motivation lacking. Excuse me? Isabella scoffed. Who do you think you are? She is the woman who owns the building you live in, Marcus Thorne said, his voice deep and rumbling. What? Isabella looked at Alex. What is he talking about? Shut up, Isabella, Alex hissed, panic rising in his throat. Eleanor signaled to the DJ booth. The music lowered. She walked past Alex and Isabella, stepping up onto the small stage. She adjusted the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, Eleanor announced. The room fell silent. Thank you for coming. As the chairwoman of Vanguard and its subsidiary, North Atlantic Ore, I have an announcement regarding the future of our partnerships. Isabella's mouth dropped open. Chairwoman? Eleanor looked directly at Alexander from the stage. Effective immediately, Vanguard Steel is initiating a new standard for ethical partnership. We will no longer supply materials to companies that demonstrate volatile leadership, financial instability, or moral bankruptcy. She paused for effect. Therefore, we are permanently severing all ties with Sterling Dynamics. Furthermore, we are calling in the debts. Sterling Dynamics financed their expansion using Vanguard-backed bonds. Per the contract clause regarding management instability, triggered by a high-profile divorce scandal, those debts are now due in full. The room erupted in murmurs. Reporters were typing furiously on their phones. Due? Alex shouted, forgetting himself. We have 30 years to pay those bonds. Read the fine print, Alexander, Eleanor said into the mic, her voice echoing through the hall. Clause 4A. Immediate repayment required if the primary guarantor, me, withdraws confidence. I withdraw my confidence. She looked down at him, looking small and pale next to his celebrity mistress. You have 48 hours to pay $300 million, Alexander. Or I initiate foreclosure proceedings on the Dubai Tower, the San Francisco headquarters, and, oh yes, the penthouse at 432 Park Avenue. She smiled, a cold, devastating smile. I hope you haven't unpacked, Isabella. Location: the penthouse, New York City, 3 days later. Date: December 5th. The descent was faster than the ascent. It had taken Alexander 10 years to build his reputation. It took Eleanor Vance 48 hours to dismantle it. The news of the debt call-in caused Sterling Dynamics stock to freefall. It plummeted 40% by the time the markets opened the morning after the Chicago summit. By noon, the board of directors had suspended Alexander's trading privileges. By evening, the creditors were circling like sharks, smelling blood in the water. Alexander sat on the floor of the penthouse living room. Boxes were everywhere. Not moving boxes, evidence boxes. The SEC had launched an investigation into undisclosed related party transactions regarding the cheap steel he had received for years. Isabella was screaming in the bedroom. "I can't believe this!" she shrieked, storming out. She was dragging a Louis Vuitton trunk, scratching the marble floor. "They froze my credit cards, Alex. The supplementary card you gave me. I tried to buy a latte and it was declined. A latte!" "Isabella, please," Alex said, holding his head in his hands. "I'm trying to figure this out. I just need to liquidate some assets." "What assets?" Isabella screamed. "She owns the steel. She owns the debt. She practically owns the air we breathe. You told me she was a nobody. You told me she was a boring little housewife." "I didn't know," Alex roared back, standing up. "How was I supposed to know she was the heiress to the biggest steel fortune in America? She drove a Honda Civic." "Because she's smart." Isabella threw a vase, a Ming Dynasty replica, at the wall. It shattered. "And you're an idiot. You left a billionaire for me." The realization hung in the air. Isabella wasn't putting herself down. She was stating a financial fact. He had traded a diamond mine for a cubic zirconia. "I'm leaving," Isabella said, buttoning her coat. "Leaving? Now?" Alex looked at her with disbelief. "Bella, I need you. We're a team. We can rebuild. I'm still Alexander Sterling." "You're Alexander Sterling with negative net worth," Isabella spat. "And I have a reputation to think of. Being the mistress of a billionaire is chic. Being the girlfriend of a bankrupt fraud is pathetic. My agent already booked me a flight to Cabo with the producer of my next movie." You're seeing someone else?" "I'm an actress, Alex. I need an audience, and your show is cancelled." She slammed the door behind her. The echo rang through the empty, cold apartment. Alex stood alone in the wreckage of his life. The silence was heavy, but this time it wasn't predatory. It was final. His phone buzzed on the floor. He picked it up. It was a notification from Zillow. Listing alert, 432 Park Avenue penthouse. Price, 45,000 lulls. Seller, the Vance Trust. She put his house on the market before he had even moved out. Alex laughed. It was a dry, manic sound. He walked to the window and looked out at the city. He could see the skeleton of a new skyscraper going up in the distance, steel beams rising into the sky. He realized now that every beam, every girder, every rivet in this city belonged to her. He had walked through her world thinking he was a giant, never realizing he was just an ant crawling on her shoe. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sterling," the doorman's voice came through. "There are some gentlemen here from the bank, and a Miss Vance is with them." Alex straightened his shirt. He walked to the elevator. He had to face her one last time. He had to try. The doors opened. Eleanor stood there, flanked by lawyers. She wasn't wearing the power suit today. She was wearing jeans and a cashmere sweater, the same outfit she wore on their first date. "Hello, Alexander," she said softly. "Ellie," Alex breathed. He fell to his knees. He didn't care about dignity anymore. "Ellie, please, I'm sorry. I was a fool. Take me back. I don't care about the money. I just want you." Eleanor looked down at him. Her expression wasn't angry. It was pity, and that hurt worse than the anger. "You don't want me, Alex," she said, stepping around him to look at the apartment. "You want the safety I provided. You want the Iron Lady to save you from the mess you made." She signaled to the lawyers. "The foreclosure is complete. You have until midnight to vacate the premises. Anything left behind will be auctioned for charity." "Ellie, where will I go?" Alex wept. "I have nothing." Eleanor stopped at the door. She looked back. her hand on the frame. "You have your freedom, Alexander. You said I was a shadow. Well, now you're out in the light. Let's see if you can shine on your own." She walked out. The elevator doors closed. Alexander Sterling, the man who wanted everything, sat alone on the cold marble floor, realizing that in his quest for more, he had lost the only thing that was real. Location: Sotheby's Auction House, Manhattan. Date: January 15th, 1 month later. The fall of a titan is rarely silent. It is usually accompanied by the sharp rap of a gavel. Alexander sat in the back row of the auction hall. He wore a coat that was slightly too large for him now. He had lost 20 pounds in the last month. He wasn't supposed to be here. His lawyers had advised against it, citing emotional self-harm. But he couldn't stay away. He watched as the artifacts of his perfect life were paraded across the stage like cattle. "Lot 405, the auctioneer announced, his voice practiced and bored. A custom-made Patek Philippe watch, engraved with the initials AS opening bid at 50,000. It was the watch Eleanor had given him for their 3rd anniversary. He had barely worn it, preferring a flashy smartwatch that tracked his heart rate. Now he watched a stranger, a hedge fund manager in a tacky plaid suit, raise a paddle. "Sold," the auctioneer clipped. Alexander flinched. That watch was worth more than his current net worth. Since the night at the penthouse, Alexander's life had been a lesson in gravity. The SEC investigation had frozen his liquid assets. The board of Sterling Dynamics had voted him out as CEO, replacing him with a conservative CFO who immediately publicly distanced the company from the former leadership's erratic behavior. Isabella Montrose was gone, appearing on the cover of People magazine 3 days later with the headline, "I survived him. Isabella opens up about toxic billionaire X." She spun a narrative of emotional manipulation that wasn't entirely true, but Alexander had no PR team left to fight it. He was living in a serviced apartment in Queens. It was clean, but small. The radiator clanked at night. The view was of a brick wall, not the skyline. "Lot 410, the auctioneer continued. A first edition copy of The Great Gatsby, signed by Fitzgerald. Alexander sat up. That was Eleanor's. It was her most prized possession. She must have left it behind in the penthouse by mistake. Opening bid, 10,000. Alexander checked his bank account on his phone. He had $12,000 left to his name, the remnants of a cashed-out 401k that hadn't been seized yet. He could buy it back. He could save one piece of her. One piece of the life they had. He raised his hand. 12,000, he shouted, his voice cracking. The room turned to look. People whispered, "Is that him? Is that Sterling? He looks terrible." "I have 12,000 from the gentleman in the back," the auctioneer said, peering over his glasses. "Do I hear 15? 20,000, a voice called out from the front row. Alexander's heart sank. He looked at the bidder. It was Marcus Thorne, Eleanor's security chief. He wasn't bidding for himself. He was bidding for the trust. Eleanor was buying her own book back, ensuring Alexander couldn't have it. 20,000 going once, sold to the gentleman in the front. Alexander slumped in his chair. She didn't even want him to have a memory. He walked out into the cold January rain. He hailed a taxi, but the yellow cab drove right past him to pick up a couple down the block. He lowered his hand. He walked to the subway station, the damp air seeping into his bones. On the platform, a digital billboard flashed an advertisement. It was for a new high-speed rail line connecting the East Coast, a project touted as the green backbone of America. The tagline faded in. Steel provided by Vanguard Industries. And then Eleanor's face appeared. She looked radiant, now strong and untouchable. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking toward a horizon Alexander could no longer see. He stood there, jostled by commuters, realizing that he was no longer the protagonist of the movie. He was just an extra in the background of her success. Location: a shared office space, Jersey City. Date: 1 year later. Sterling, the coffee machine is jammed again. Alexander looked up from his cubicle. I'm on it, Gary. Alexander Sterling, former cover model for Forbes, was now a junior sales associate for a mid-tier logistics firm in New Jersey. It was the only job he could get. No reputable tech company would hire him. He was a liability, a walking lawsuit. He walked to the break room and fiddled with the plastic machine. He was wearing a suit from Zara. He took the bus to work. His life was a cycle of mediocrity. He woke up, ate toast, went to work, got yelled at by Gary, a man who used to follow Alexander on Twitter, and went home to watch Netflix alone. He had tried to reach out to Eleanor. He sent emails. They bounced back. He wrote handwritten letters. They were returned unopened. He even tried to show up at the Vanguard headquarters in Pittsburgh, but Marcus Thorne had met him at the gate and politely informed him that if he returned, he would be arrested for trespassing. He was a ghost. One afternoon, Gary dropped a file on his desk. Big client coming in today, Sterling. I need you to take notes. Don't speak unless spoken to. We're trying to land a contract for shipping heavy machinery. Sure, Gary, Alex sighed. At 2 p.m., the clients arrived. Alexander sat in the corner of the conference room, clutching a notepad. The door opened. 2 men in suits walked in, followed by a woman. Alexander stopped breathing. It wasn't Eleanor. It was her assistant, a woman named Sarah, whom Alexander had fired 3 years ago because she walked too loudly. Sarah stopped when she saw him. Her eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed into a look of supreme satisfaction. Sarah, Alex whispered. It's Ms. Jenkins, she said coolly. I'm the VP of Logistics for the Vanguard Foundation now. Gary looked between them, sweating. You know each other? I used to work for Mr. Sterling's wife, Sarah said, emphasizing the word wife. Before he imploded. The meeting was excruciating. Alexander had to sit there and take notes while Sarah dictated terms. She was sharp, professional, and utterly dismissive of him. She treated him like furniture. At the end of the meeting, as everyone was shaking hands, Sarah paused by Alexander's chair. She's happy, you know, Sarah said quietly. Alex looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. Is she? She got remarried last month, Sarah dropped the bomb casually, to a pediatric surgeon, a good man, someone who doesn't need her to be small so he can feel big. The room spun. Remarried. It was over. Truly over. The tiny flame of hope he had been nurturing, the delusion that if he just worked hard enough and proved he had changed, she might take him back, was extinguished. Does she ever talk about me? Alex asked, his voice trembling. Sarah considered this for a moment. No, Alexander, she doesn't. You're just a tax write-off from a previous fiscal year. Sarah walked out. Alexander sat in the empty conference room. He looked at his notepad. He had written nothing. He realized then that the worst punishment wasn't poverty. It wasn't public humiliation. It was the realization that the person who had loved him most had completely erased him from her internal narrative. To Isabella, he was a story to sell. To Eleanor, he was nothing. Location: Central Park, New York City, near the Bethesda Fountain. Date: 5 years later. The October wind cut through the park, carrying the crisp scent of burning leaves and roasted chestnuts. For most New Yorkers, it was the smell of autumn romance. For Alexander Sterling, it was just another reminder that winter was coming, and his heating bill was overdue. Alexander sat on a peeling green bench, watching the tourists snap photos of the angel statue. He was 42 now, but he looked 50. The thick, lustrous hair that had once been the subject of GQ profiles was thinning and grey at the temples. His suit, a polyester blend from a discount rack, shined cheaply in the sunlight. He wasn't destitute. He was a senior logistics manager at a trucking firm in Newark. But he was invisible. He was part of the grey background of the city he used to think he owned. He unwrapped a foil-wrapped sandwich, tuna prepared in his kitchenette that morning, and took a bite. It was dry. "Ball! Ball!" A bright red rubber ball bounced off the toe of his scuffed dress shoe. Alexander flinched, pulling his legs back. A little girl, perhaps 3 or 4 years old, toddled up to him. She was dressed in a miniature Burberry coat and cute woolen tights. She had dark curls and eyes that were intelligent, inquisitive, and painfully familiar. Alexander picked up the ball. The girl stopped, putting a finger in her mouth, waiting. "Is this yours?" Alexander asked, forcing a smile. It felt rusty. "Sophia, don't run off!" The voice hit Alexander like a physical shockwave. He dropped the ball. It rolled away, forgotten. He looked up. Walking down the path, maneuvering a sleek, beige stroller, was a woman. She wore a camel hair coat that draped effortlessly over a cream cashmere sweater. She wore no jewelry except for a simple platinum band and a pair of diamond studs that caught the light. It was Eleanor. But it wasn't the Eleanor he had divorced. It wasn't even the Iron Lady who had destroyed him in the boardroom. This was something else entirely. She looked peaceful. The sharp edges of her anger had softened into a serene, untouchable confidence. She looked like a woman who had everything she ever wanted. "Alex?" She stopped, her hand resting protectively on the girl's shoulder. Alexander stood up too quickly, crumbs falling from his lap. He brushed them away frantically, shame burning his cheeks. "Eleanor," he croaked. He cleared his throat, trying to find the smooth baritone that used to charm investors. It was gone. I didn't think you were in the city." "We live in Connecticut now," Eleanor said, pleasantly, as if she were talking to an old neighbor she barely remembered. "We just came in for the ballet matinee. Sophia loves the costumes." "Sophia," Alexander repeated, looking at the child. She's beautiful." "Thank you," Eleanor smiled down at her daughter. "Sophia, say hello." "Hi," the girl whispered, hiding behind Eleanor's coat. Is her father here?" Alexander asked, looking around, half terrified that a security team would tackle him. "Gabriel is getting pretzels." Eleanor gestured toward a vendor cart where a tall, broad-shouldered man in a navy pea coat was laughing with the vendor. He looked kind. He looked solid. He looked like a man who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Silence stretched between them. Alexander felt the weight of 5 years of mediocrity crushing him. He wanted to run, but he was rooted to the spot. He needed something from her. Absolution? Anger? Anything to prove that he still existed in her world. "I read about the merger," Alexander said, grasping for a topic. "Vanguard acquiring that lithium mine in Nevada." "Smart move." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "You keep up with the news?" "I try," Alexander said. I wanted to tell you, Ellie. I've changed. I'm working hard. It's honest work. I'm not the same man." He took a step forward, his eyes pleading. "I know I broke us. I know I was a fool. But looking back, we were a good team once, weren't we? Before the fame, before the money, those late nights when I was building the Nebula prototype, and you were making coffee. That was real, wasn't it?" He needed that validation. He needed to believe that his genius, at least, had been real, that he had brought something to the table, even if he had ruined it later. Eleanor's expression shifted. The pity returned, but this time it was mixed with a resolve to finally cut the last thread. "Alexander," she said softly, "you hold on to that prototype like it's a holy relic." "It was revolutionary," Alexander insisted, a spark of his old arrogance flaring up. "The Nebula won. It launched the Empire. Even if I lost it all, I built that. I invented the tech that changed the industry. You can't take that away from me." Eleanor sighed. She glanced over at her husband, Gabriel, ensuring he was still occupied. Then she stepped closer to Alexander, lowering her voice so Sophia wouldn't hear. "I think it's time you knew the truth," she said, "so you can finally let go." "The truth? What truth?" "The Nebula won," Eleanor said, her voice steady and precise. "It didn't work, Alex. It overheated after 40 minutes of use. The processing speed was average at best. The industry laughed at it." "That's a lie," Alexander stammered. "We sold out. The first order was for 10,000 units. A shell company bought them for—" He trailed off. The memory of the Chicago summit flashed in his mind. Shell companies. His face went pale. "You," he whispered. "I created a holding company called Orion Logistics," Eleanor confessed. "I used my personal trust fund. I bought every single unit of the Nebula One. I paid full retail price." "But the reviews, the buzz." "Marketing firms I hired," Eleanor shrugged. "I paid for the hype. I paid for the initial sales figures, so you could secure Series A funding from the venture capitalists. Once you had the funding, you hired real engineers who fixed the tech for the second version. But the first one? The one you built with your own hands?" She paused, letting the words hang in the cold air. "It was junk, Alexander. I had them shipped to a recycling plant in New Jersey. They were melted down for scrap metal 3 weeks after you sold them." Alexander grabbed the back of the bench to steady himself. The world was spinning. "Why?" he gasped. "Why would you do that?" "Because I loved you," Eleanor said, and the sadness in her eyes was profound. "I saw how desperate you were to be a great man. You were falling apart. You were depressed. I wanted to give you a win. I thought if you felt successful, you would become the man I knew you could be. I thought I was building your confidence." She shook her head slowly. "I didn't realize I was feeding a monster. I bought your success, Alexander. I bought your reputation. I even bought the suit you wore on the cover of Forbes. You were never a self-made billionaire. You were a scholarship student in a school I built for you." Alexander looked down at his hands. He felt stripped naked. Every accolade, every cheer, every moment of pride he had ever felt. It was all charity. It was all her. "So I was nothing?" he whispered, tears leaking from his eyes. "This whole time, I was just your pet project?" "You were my husband," Eleanor corrected gently. "But you wanted to be a god. And gods don't have wives, Alex. They have worshippers. And I was tired of kneeling." "Mommy!" Sophia tugged on Eleanor's hand. "Daddy has pretzels." Eleanor looked back at Gabriel, who was walking toward them with a warm smile, holding 2 large, soft pretzels. "I have to go," Eleanor said. She didn't offer a handshake. She didn't offer a hug. She simply stepped back, creating a chasm between them that could never be crossed. "Goodbye, Alexander. I hope you find a life that is real this time." She turned and walked away. Alexander watched as Gabriel wrapped an arm around her waist and kissed her temple. He watched them walk into the golden autumn light, a perfect, self-sufficient unit. Alexander Sterling sat back down on the peeling green bench. He looked at the skyscraper in the distance. The one he used to claim was his legacy. He realized now that he hadn't built it. He hadn't even designed it. He had just been the actor standing in front of the green screen, reciting lines written by the woman he had thrown away. He picked up his foil-wrapped sandwich. It was cold. He took a bite anyway, swallowing the dry, tasteless bread as the leaves fell around him like gold coins he could never spend. And that is the crushing reality of Alexander Sterling. He spent his life believing he was the architect of his own destiny, never realizing he was merely a tenant in a house built by his wife's love. In the end, the twist wasn't just that he lost his money. It was the revelation that his genius was a fabrication paid for by the very woman he called plain. Alexander wanted to be a king, but he forgot that a king is nothing without the person who funds the crown. Now, Alexander sits on a park bench, a man made of glass, shattered by the truth. Meanwhile, Eleanor walks into her future, proving that the strongest steel isn't found in a skyscraper, but in the backbone of a woman who knows her own worth. Wow, that ending hit hard. Do you think Eleanor was right to hide the truth about his success for so long? Or did she accidentally create the monster he became? I want to hear your theories in the comments. If this story gave you chills, please smash that like button and share this video with a friend who loves a good karma story. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We have an even crazier revenge story coming up next week. Thanks for watching.